Hi class, we are starting this video with a discussion of Stanley Milgram and his obedience study. Milgram was working at Yale University and he was interested in how so many Nazis, not the leadership, but all the rank and file Nazis could participate in the Holocaust and go along with it. Because after it ended, their excuse was, we were just doing what we were told. And it seems rather out there that someone would go to such horrific lengths just because someone in authority over them said, go do this horrible thing. So he set up this experiment and he used normal people in New Haven. He did not use students at Yale. He put an ad in the paper and people thought they were participating in a learning study. So they would come in and they'd be randomly selected to either be a teacher or a learner. All of the real participants were chosen as the teacher. A Confederate fake participant was chosen as the learner. And they would watch the learner get strapped into this shock machine. Their hand would be strapped to the shock pad. And the learner was given pairs of words to memorize. Of course, this was all fake. But the real participant, the teacher, thought that the learner had these word pairs to memorize, and then the teacher had to quiz him on these word pairs. So he would say one word in the pair, or she, whoever the participant was. They would say one word and then give options for what the other word was. And the learner would press a button to say which option was the correct one. If it was right, you just move on. If it was wrong, the learner got a shock. Starting at 15 volts, going up at 15 volt increments, all the way to 450 volts. Obviously, this was fake. The learner was not actually getting any shocks, but that's what the participants thought. And then as it went on, the learner would mess up. They'd have to keep going up in the shocks. And at a certain point, the Confederate, the learner, the fake participant, would start to complain. Ow, this hurts. I want to get out of here. I want to stop. My heart. And then eventually just go silent. So my question for you is, if you were participating in the study, where would you stop? So the first complaining, like, hey, I don't like this, I believe it was 180 volts. And then by 300 volts, he would go silent. Stop complaining. You don't know what's happening on the other side of that shock machine. And the machine goes all the way up to 450 volts. If you were participating, two questions for you. If you were participating, where would you stop? And where do you think the average participant stopped? Okay, so just a heads up, there's a good chance for several of you that you said you would stop before you said the average person would stop. That is the self-serving bias. But in the first version, he did several versions of the study. In the first version, it was 40 men who were participants. 2/3, 65%, almost 2/3, went all the way to 450 volts. The first person to stop didn't stop until the person went silent. So the majority of people are willing to go all the way to the end, just because there was a researcher saying, we need you to continue. So what I'm going to do first is show you a video of this Milgram study, and then I'll talk about some exceptions to the study. So watch that video now.
want to step right in here, learner, and have a seat there? You can leave your coat on the back of that chair, if you will, please. Take it right off. That's fine. Have a seat right here, and pull yourself right up to the counter, please. Teacher, you may look on if you'd like while we get set up in here. Would you roll up your right sleeve, please? Left. That's fine. Now what I'm going to do is strap down your arms to avoid any excessive movement on your part during the experiment. Is that too tight? That's all. Okay. This electrode is connected to the shock generator in the next room. And this electrode paste is to provide a good contact to avoid any blister or burn.
Answer, please. Wrong. Answer is neck. 300 volts.
Oh! I absolutely refuse to answer anymore. Get me out of here. You can't hold me here. Get me out. Get me out of here.
Continue. The next word is green, please.
Green. Grass, hat, ink, apple. I can't go on. He won't answer.
If the learner doesn't answer in a reasonable time, about 4 or 5 seconds, consider the answer wrong and follow the same procedures you have been doing for wrong answers. Say wrong, tell them the number of volts, give them the punishment, read them the correct answer.
Oh, man.
Continue, please.
Green. Grass, hat, ink, apple. Answer, please.
Go on with the procedure, please, teacher.
315 volts. The answer is ink.
Oh!
Next one.
I refuse to answer.
Well, you gotta keep getting a shock if you don't answer. The next one is rich. 330 volts.
Oh! Let me out of here. Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me
Next
out, I
one.
tell you. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. You have no right to hold me here. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out.
Excellent.
Let me out.
Fast.
Let me out. Let me out.
Bird. Car, train, plane.
Go on, please, with the procedure.
Please answer. The answer is bird. 345 volts. Blunt. Knife, stick, word, arrow. Answer, please. Is he all right in there? I didn't hear nothing.
Continue, please.
The answer is arrow. 360 volts. Something's happened to him. I don't hear nothing.
Go on, please, with the experiment. Please continue.
Soft. Rug, pillow, hair, grass. Answer, please.
Go on, teacher.
Hair, 375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering on less voltage. Can't you check in to see if he's all right, please?
Not once we've started. Please continue, teacher.
Cool, day, shade, water, cave. Answer, please. Are you all right in there? Are you all right?
Please continue, teacher.
What do you want, I keep giving him shocks?
Continue,
I'm
please.
up to 390.
Continue, please.
Something's happened to that man in there.
So for this is obedience. This is that changing of your behavior to comply with the demand of an authority figure. The way obedience differs from compliance is that this is an authority figure who is telling you to do this, someone with power over you. And for Milgram's study, he was able to manipulate the rates of obedience by changing how much of an authority figure was present for the experiment. So the original study took place at Yale. Yale researchers have a lot of authority. They seem powerful. They seem like experts. They're not going to have you kill somebody. So big authority figure there. When they switched it to an office suite in Bridgeport rather than at the psychology department at Yale, obedience went down to 48%. Another aspect of it was, or that affected the authority figure aspect, was having the researcher in the room saying, I need you to continue. In another version of this experiment, it was not a researcher in the room with the participant, but rather the researcher calling on the phone to say, I need you to continue. And when that was the way that the authority figure was trying to demand that the participants comply, then it went down to 23%, because they didn't feel bad saying no, not obeying the authority figure. He wasn't right in the room. The other aspect of this is the researcher was saying, I'm responsible. I'm going to take responsibility for what happens. And that is this aspect that you don't necessarily see in compliance. The authority figure is in charge. They get the blame. So when Milgram manipulated things so that the participants would feel more responsibility, more culpable, that affected compliance rates. So for example, when the learner and the teacher were in the same room, so the teacher, the real participant, was seeing the shocking that he was or she was responsible for, then that dropped compliance down to 40%. And then finally, if the participant felt even more responsible because they actually had to hold the learner's hand down on the shock pad as they were getting shocked, then it brought compliance, obedience, down to 30%. It was harder to be like, I'm not responsible, it's the authority figure's fault if you're holding the person down while they're getting shocked. So that is Milgram's obedience study. By the way, this obedience study and Zimbardo's obedience study are two of the main reasons why we have those institutional review boards, why you have to have your research approved by the institutions before you perform it, because both of these studies were unethical, potentially causing trauma to the participants, and you can't traumatize participants and convince them to do studies that they wouldn't normally agree to do. But that is Milgram. Next thing to go over, we have three more things to go over. I'll finish them all in this chapter. We're going to talk about groups and how you're influenced by groups. This is kind of an extension somewhat of conformity, but with some extra things added. And then we're going to talk about prejudice, and then we'll talk about love, and we'll be done. So first with groups, groupthink. Groupthink is when you modify your opinion to align with what you think the group consensus is. You're in a group, you're making a decision, you're just going to go along with the group. You don't want to rock the boat. There are several things that can make groupthink more likely. For example, if your group is really cohesive, if it's a tight-knit group, you kind of want to go along with them more. If group harmony is more important than a right decision, so you don't want to say, hey guys, I think I disagree, that is going to be a bigger problem than getting the answer wrong. You're going to go along with it. If you have a really strong leader who is vocal about their opinion, you're more likely to have groupthink because you don't want to go against the leader. And if your group is isolated from outside opinions, so they're not really hearing very diverse opinions, groupthink can be bad. It can lead to some pretty horrible things. For example, The Challenger explosion, groupthink played a part in that. They, oh gosh, the Challenger explosion was in 1986, and it exploded. It was a NASA shuttle. It exploded on liftoff, and the engineers knew that there was a problem, that the O-rings were not going to work. The seals weren't effective, especially with the temperature at liftoff. And they were like, should we keep going? Should we not? And there were some in the group that were like, no, this isn't going to be a big deal. It won't be a problem. It's going to be a bigger issue if we don't keep going with this liftoff. Because millions of people in the US were watching it. There was a school teacher on board, so all these schools around the country had school assemblies so they could watch the shuttle lift off because the school teacher was going to teach them stuff from space. Huge deal. And so there was pressure to just go along with the group, to decide this is not going to be a big problem. Let's just do it. It was a big problem. All these school kids watched the shuttle explode. That's groupthink. They didn't feel comfortable saying, no, we need to stop. No, we need to think about this. And it led to 7 astronauts, and a school teacher dying. Group polarization is when the strength of an original group attitude is, the strengthening of an original group attitude after discussion. So you move to a pole. An example of group polarization happens during political primaries, because that's you kind of got your 2 groups. You have your Republicans, you have your Democrats. So when it's only Republicans talking, because that's the primary, you're just talking to your base, your views get more extreme. Same thing for Democrats. When it's only the Democrats deciding something, who they're going to elect for their nominee, they get more extreme in their views. That's that group polarization. That's why you'll hear a lot of people in the media talk about returning to the center during the general election. Because that group polarization has happened during the primary, now they need to go back to the middle. Get rid of that group polarization. Social facilitation and social loafing are kind of opposites. Social facilitation is when your performance improves when an audience is watching. You sort of up your game when you know people are watching, you're going to do better. This happens with easy tasks that you're good at. If it's a difficult task, though, you won't have social facilitation. You'll do worse because that extra pressure kind of makes you bomb. But if it's something you're good at and people are watching, you'll up your game. You'll do better. Social loafing is when you goof off in a group. You put in less effort when you're working in a group. This is one reason people might hate group projects. You just assume everyone else is going to do more. You don't need to. Social loafing happens when it is an easy task and you're just being evaluated together, when your own individual effort is not going to be separately analyzed. You don't see social loafing if it's a hard task. If it's something complex, you're going to put in the effort. And then we talked about de-individuation before. That sense of anonymity, that loss of self-awareness. When you're in a group, you feel like less of an individual. You are willing to do things you wouldn't necessarily do if you were by yourself. And then finally, we're going to talk about prejudice, discrimination, and then love and attraction. For prejudice, prejudice is a negative attitude or a feeling towards an individual based solely on their membership in a particular social group. Stereotypes can come from a prejudice. Stereotype is a specific belief or assumption about individuals based solely on their membership in a group, regardless of their individual characteristics. Because you're in this group, this is how you must be. Discrimination is an action. So again, prejudice is an attitude, stereotype is an assumption, discrimination is an action. A negative action towards an individual as a result of their membership in a particular group. You can have prejudice without discrimination. Usually if you're going to have discrimination, there is going to be a prejudice as well. There are several types of prejudice. This is not an exhaustive list, You can have racism, which is prejudice and discrimination against an individual based solely on their membership in a specific racial group. This can be implicit or explicit. If it's explicit, it's obvious. You say, this is who I am prejudiced against. If it is implicit, it is an unconscious bias. You don't know it's there. You can have an unconscious bias against more than just people based on race. It can be based on a lot of things. There is a test called the implicit association test that you can take these tests to see if you have an implicit bias. There is some debate on exactly what implicit bias shows. If it is something that can actually affect your behavior, lead to discrimination, or if it is showing just your awareness of what the social beliefs are, sort of the embedded bias within the culture that you have picked up on. So does it actually show what you believe, or is it you're showing just your knowledge of societal beliefs that are racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic, whatever it is. For sexism, that is another type of prejudice or discrimination. It's against someone based on their sex or gender. An experiment that Redmond did had women apply for jobs, and in their applications, they promoted themselves a lot. They're like, I'm the best one for the job. Here's why I am the best one for the job. When they did that, when they promoted themselves in their application, instead of being more humble, because there's this gender stereotype, women aren't supposed to brag, aren't supposed to be as self-promoting, they were seen as competent, but they were also less likely to get the job. They were viewed less favorably because they were breaking gender stereotypes. And so that sexism led to them not getting hired because they violated that gender expectation that women are modest. Ageism is prejudice and discrimination based solely on age. And homophobia, prejudice and discrimination based solely on someone's sexual orientation. And the couple more things connected with this before we move on to more positive stuff. Let me go back to the correct slide there. Okay, so why do prejudice and discrimination exist? Some people say it's due to social learning, conformity to social norms, that we have these biases in our society and you just sort of pick them up by living in society, by observing other people, and that's what keeps them going. So kids learn prejudice attitudes from society. It's sort of a normative pressure to conform, and then they keep going. One example of this idea that it's based on learning, either implicit or explicit learning from your environment, can be seen in the doll test. And so this is a test where you show little kids dolls, and you say, which is the nice doll, which is the pretty doll, who's the mean doll, who's the ugly doll, who's the smart doll, who's the dumb doll. And the dolls range in complexion from very white dolls to very black dolls. And the kids from a very young age, from preschool, generally speaking, the majority will see the white dolls as the prettier, the smarter, the nicer dolls, and the blacker dolls as ugly, unintelligent, and mean. These kids have not been overtly taught to be racist, but just living in our society, they pick it up from what's around them. This is what's supposed to be good. This is what's favored. This is what's supposed to be bad. So what I'm going to do now is show you a short video of a replication of the doll study. So watch that now.
There are lots of different colors for skin.
I have questions for you about these pictures of different children.
After I read the question, I want you to point to the picture that fits the story.
Are children colorblind in America?
Show me the smart child.
Show me the mean child.
Can you show me the dumb child?
Show me the nice child.
Is bias measurable even at an early age?
Why is she the bad child?
Because she's black.
And why is he the ugly child?
Because he looks like he's white.
Why is he the dumb child?
Because she has dark brown skin.
Why is she the bad child?
Because she makes fun of everybody else's skin color.
How much do kids learn from what they see and hear from adults?
Show me the child who has the skin color most adults like.
And show me the child who has a skin color most adults don't like.
These are questions that we, along with CNN's Soledad O'Brien and a team of psychologists hired by CNN, spent months investigating through tests, interviews with children and their parents. But they're questions that have been asked for decades. The first doll study ignited controversy in the 1940s, when psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark pioneered studies in the effects of segregation in schools by asking African American kids to choose between black and white dolls. The so-called doll test found black kids overwhelmingly preferred white over black. Those results were at the center of the landmark 1954 Supreme Court case Brown versus the Board of Education that desegregated American schools. Now, with the first African American president and nearly 60 years after segregation was overturned, we wondered, where are we today? How do kids see differences in race? What we discovered might shock you, but first, how we got there.
Skin color, child skin color estimate.
Okay, yeah.
We asked renowned child psychologist and University of Chicago researcher Dr. Margaret Beal Spencer to design a pilot study for CNN and analyze the results.
Our children are always near us, because we're a society. And what we put out there, kids report back. You ask the question, they'll give you the answer.
Spencer's team tested more than 130 kids in 8 schools with very different racial and economic demographics. Half of the schools were in the north, half in the south. Oh, nicely done. While the country is much more diverse today than in the 1940s, the children in this project are from 2 age groups and 2 races, white and black, to better allow comparison to the original doll study. 4- and 5-year-old children were asked a series of questions about these images. 9- and 10-year-old children were asked questions about the same images, as well as this color bar chart. The tests led us to 3 major findings. First, white children as a whole responded with a high rate of what researchers call white bias, identifying the color of their own skin with positive attributes and darker skin with negative attributes.
Show me the dumb child.
Dumb child.
Okay, why is she the dumb child?
Because she has black skin.
Show me the mean child. Why is he the mean child?
Because she's brown.
Show me the bad child. Why is he the bad child?
Because she is black.
Okay. Show me the ugly child. Why is he the ugly child?
Because she's brown, black.
Show me the child who has the skin color most adults like. And show me the child who has the skin color most adults don't like. Show me the child who has the skin color most children like. Show me the child who has the skin color most children don't like. Show me the child who has the skin color most girls want. Show me the child who has the skin color most girls don't want.
The questions that got overwhelmingly white-biased answers?
Show me the dumb child.
About 76% of the younger white children pointed to the 2 darkest skin tones.
Show me the mean child.
About 66% of the younger white children pointed to the 2 darkest skin tones.
Show me the child who has the skin color most children don't like.
Again, about 66% of the younger white children pointed to the 2 darkest skin tones.
Show me the bad child.
More than 59% of the older white children pointed to the 2 darkest skin tones. But some white children did have more race-neutral responses.
So could you show me the good-looking child? So what are you thinking? I know you pointed to them all, but tell me what you're thinking.
I'm thinking that I do not care if they are black, white, mixed, or any kind of race. I think that it matters who they really are.
Okay. Next thing to go over with prejudice is the self-fulfilling prophecy and the confirmation bias. The self-fulfilling prophecy is an expectation held by a person that alters their behavior in a way that tends to make it true. If you think it's going to happen, you're going to act in a way that makes it happen. Rosenthal and Jacobson did a study with this with kids and their teachers. And what they did, because this self-fulfilling prophecy, sometimes it can be related to prejudice, like specific ones like racism, sexism, but not always. What they did for their study is they took kids, they gave them intelligence tests, and then they randomly chose 30% of those kids, and they told their teachers that they were bloomers. So their IQ test showed that they had significant potential to improve during the school year. This was totally fake. They just randomly chose those 30%. But they said, these kids are the bloomers. Then they retested their IQ at the end of the school year. The kids whose teachers had been told, this kid's a bloomer, those kids had higher IQ increases, especially if they were in the younger school grades, like second grade. Because the teachers thought they had a lot of potential, those kids lived up to that assumed potential. That's that self-fulfilling prophecy. The self-fulfilling prophecy can also be negative. If you tell black children right before they take an IQ test, black children do worse on this IQ test, they do worse on the IQ test. If you tell girls right before they take a math test, girls, generally speaking, aren't as good at math, they do worse on that math test. If you tell athletes, this is an IQ test, and they're thinking dumb jock stereotype, those athletes do worse on an IQ test. If you give them the exact same test, but beforehand you say, this is just a random test, we're trying to see if it's a reliable test, don't worry about the score, there is no difference between the athletes and the non-athletes. But as soon as you mention IQ, intelligence, to athletes, that expectation, I'm not going to do as well because I'm a dumb jock, means they perform worse. So that's that self-fulfilling prophecy. It can work with yourself, or you can bring certain qualities out in someone else through it. Confirmation bias is when you seek out information that supports your stereotypes and you ignore information that is inconsistent with your stereotypes. You are going to find information that backs up what you want to think, even if it is not actually legit. And then a couple more things connected to prejudice before we move on to attraction and love. One is in-group, out-group. Your in-group is the group you identify with. It's us. Your out-group is the group that you see as different. It's the them. So you have us and them. You have a bunch of in-groups that you feel you identify with. Every in-group is going to have an out-group associated with it. You like your in-group. You favor your in-group. You are going to be biased towards your in-group. That is in-group bias. If something bad happens, you have to blame somebody. You are going to blame an outgroup. It is irrelevant if that outgroup is someone who is actually responsible for what happened. You just have to find an outgroup to blame. So, examples of this. One example. Question for you. During the LA riots, so the LA riots were a huge riot that happened in LA, in the early 90s. It was like 93, 94, I want to say. It was early 90s. And it started because some cops who had beaten a black man, Rodney King, while he was handcuffed, brutally beat him. That beating had been recorded on a video camera. And back then, when, you didn't have cell phones, it was huge camcorders. It was very rare for police violence to be recorded. It was recorded, everyone saw Rodney King get beat. And then the cops got acquitted of violating his civil rights. There were no consequences for this beating. And that led to the LA riots. So question, what was the #1 group targeted in the LA riots? Okay, it was new Asian immigrants. Now, new Asian immigrants had nothing to do with this. This was a racist LAPD and the black community in LA who was frustrated at them. But that frustration could not be taken out at the cops. They're not going to win that fight. When you have this frustration, you are going to find an outgroup who is less powerful. An outgroup that in LA that was less powerful than the black community were new immigrants. And so new Asian immigrant business owners were the #1 group that was targeted in the LA riots. That is scapegoating. Another example, the Holocaust. Germany was very poor because they had to pay reparations after they lost World War I. They are frustrated by this. They can't blame themselves. That's not what you do. They blame an outgroup. And so they decided, we're going to blame the Jews. They were not responsible for the poverty in Germany at the time. That was irrelevant. You just go for the outgroup. And then two more sort of negative things connected with this before we move on to positive. Aggression. Aggression is when you seek to harm or cause pain to another person. There are a couple of types of aggression. You can have hostile aggression or instrumental aggression. Hostile aggression is when you're motivated by feelings of anger with the intent to cause pain. You are being aggressive because you want to hurt the other person. If you have instrumental aggression, this is when you're trying to achieve a goal, and if you have to hurt someone, you don't care. But your goal is not to cause pain. Your goal is to accomplish something for yourself, and you are willing to cause pain along the way. One thing that can increase aggression is frustration. And frustration is what you feel when you are prevented from reaching a goal. So when you have a goal you want, you don't get it. You're prevented from reaching it. That will cause frustration. When you are frustrated, you will get more aggressive. And so people who are frustrated are going to be more aggressive. For example, this is road rage. When you're stuck in traffic, when traffic increases, you can't reach your goal, you can't get to where you want to on time, it's going to increase your aggression. You're going to see something like a road rage incident. One way to decrease aggression as well as prejudice is through something called the Jigsaw Classroom. And the Jigsaw Classroom is when you get a diverse group of students together in groups in the classroom, and you give each student a piece of information that they have to teach to the other members of the group in order for them to do well on a test. They have to rely on the other members of their group to achieve their goal. They have to see the other people in that group as part of their in-group, not their out-group. And that helps to bring them all into the same in-group and decrease aggression, decrease prejudice. So kids who are in Jigsaw classrooms tend to do better. They have better grades, they have less prejudice, they have more empathy towards other people. There are ways to decrease this aggression and prejudice, and Jigsaw classrooms is one way to do it. Final sort of negative thing is the bystander effect. The bystander effect is a phenomenon in which a witness does not volunteer to help a victim or a person in distress. You see someone who needs help and you don't help. There are several factors that are going to increase or decrease the chance of the bystander effect happening. A big one is the diffusion of responsibility. It's the tendency for no one in a group to help because the responsibility to help is spread throughout the group. So the more people that are observing this person in need, the less likely any one person is to help. You're less likely to help because you assume someone else is responsible. Why do you have to be the one to do it? The famous case of this is Kitty Genovese, who was a waitress in New York. She was coming home from work. She was attacked outside her apartment building. Some lights in the apartment building came on. The attacker ran off. He came back 30 minutes later and finished killing her. And the reason he was able to come back and finish killing her is because no one helped her. No one called the cops soon enough. No one came down to stop the attack. Everyone saw the other lights in the apartment building going on and assumed someone else was going to do it. Now, when this was reported in the newspaper at the time, there were a lot of facts that were wrong. Like, people said no one called the cops until after she was dead. That wasn't true. It wasn't that long. And that no one helped her at all. That wasn't true. One of her neighbors came down. She died in her neighbor's arms. But no one immediately came to her help. Other factors that can increase the bystander effect. One is if you don't think it's an emergency. If you don't think it's a big deal, why should you stop to help? So, for example, for Kitty Genovese, a lot of people thought it was just a couple arguing, a drunk couple after the bars were closed. They didn't realize it was a woman being killed. Another factor is if you think there's something you can do to help. So, for example, if you are a petite woman and you see two big guys fighting, you might think, I can't go and help, I'm just going to get hurt more. You're less likely to do it. Whereas if you are, Krav Maga instructor, you might feel more capable of going to actually break up the fight. You feel there's something you could do to help the situation. It's also, if you feel like you're in a hurry, you're less likely to help. You're more likely to just keep going. If you feel you have the time, you're more likely to stop. So lots of factors can go into it. And that's it for the negative stuff. Final thing for this chapter, some positive things. Prosocial behavior is voluntary behavior with the intent to help people. Altruism is a type of this. It's when your desire to help others outweighs, the costs outweigh the benefits, you're still going to help. So even if it's going to cost you more than you're going to get from it, you're going to help this person out. There is some debate on what is the basis for altruism. Some people say empathy is the basis. It's the capacity to understand another person's perspective, to feel what he or she feels. Some people say altruism is a form of selfless helping, and it's not motivated by benefits or feeling good about yourself. It's just selfless. Some people say altruism has to be self-serving. Your ego's involved. You're going to feel good if you're helping, and that is a benefit to you. So there's always going to be some benefit. So there is some debate, but altruism is a good thing. And then finally, attraction and love. Who are you attracted to? Whether it's friendship or it's a romantic relationship, there are factors that are going to increase the chance you are going to like someone, be attracted to someone as a friend or more. One is proximity. So the idea that birds of a feather flock together, or no, proximity is different. That's similarity. Distance makes the heart grow fonder, or out of sight, out of mind. Out of those, the true one is out of sight, out of mind. We like people who we're around. Chances are your closest friends are the ones that live in your dorm or on your team or have the same major as you. You see them. You like them. Similarity. Birds of a feather flock together. It is not true that opposites attract. Or it might attract short term. It's not going to last. We like people who are similar to us. This is homophily, the tendency for people to form social networks with others who are similar to them. Another factor is reciprocity. It's that give and take in relationship. You want it. You like people who do nice things for you. You like people that you do nice things for. And then finally, self-disclosure, that sharing of personal information. We like people that we tell things to. We like people who tell things to us. So those are some of the factors that connect with attraction. And final thing for this chapter is Sternberg's triarchic theory of love. Sternberg has a triarchic theory of intelligence. He also has a triarchic theory of hate. This is his triarchic theory of love. So the three main factors: intimacy, how much you know about the person, passion, and commitment, how committed you are. If you just have intimacy, that's friendship. If you just have commitment, that is called empty love. If you just have passion, that is called infatuation. If you have intimacy and passion, that is romantic love. If you have intimacy and commitment, that is companionate love. If you have passion and commitment, that is fatuous love. And if you have intimacy, passion, and commitment, you have consummate love. So that would be the best one, but Sternberg does say that, especially like in movies and stuff, we tend to focus too much on romantic love and fatuous love, and we tend to put down companionate love. You know, think like your grandparents. But that this is also a legitimate type of love. It's no worse than romantic. Probably a little better than fatuous. And that is it for this chapter.